Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Unpacking Love. I'm so excited to have a return guest in the house. We've got Colin. Hey Colin, how's it going?
Hey, Michelle. Excited to be back. Glad you brought me back for another episode.
I'm so excited to have you. And for anyone who's listening who's like, ooh, when did we hear from Colin? You guys can check out episode 23, which was called Breakup Stages with Vidya. And then we did episode 25, which was practical tips for getting through a breakup. And again, we also did that with Colin and Vidya. So be sure to check those out for more from Colin. So today we are going to be talking about divorce. And I'm just so honored to even have Colin come on here to share what he's learned throughout his experience with us. So, Colin, thank you so much for coming here to share your wisdom with us.
Thanks, Michelle. I think given the fact that you've had me on for a episode on breakups and now an episode on divorce, I think I'm kind of like your breakup doctor coming in to tell the people how to get through breakups and divorces. I'm your guy.
Yeah, exactly. So, thank you so much once again. So, I think to get started, let's first talk about what divorce is and then also why it's such an important topic for us to talk about.
Yes. So, first of all, for all you listening, reason I'm here today is because I am divorced myself, and I'm glad that I'm here talking about it because it's a topic that pretty sensitive, but I think it's really important to talk about because I want to help people who may be fearful of it or people who are maybe going through it right now or about to go through it, have been through it. I think sharing some of my insights and story hopefully will help a lot of people out there. So that's why I'm here talking about it. But yeah, to answer your question, what is divorce? So divorce, just to put it plainly, it's when, two people who are married decide to dissolve that legal union or that legal marriage and go back to being two, separate individuals again, legally speaking. It's basically break up on another level. It's, got all the emotional stuff that breakups have, plus all the legal stuff that a normal breakup wouldn't have. And why is it important to talk about? Well, because divorce affects a lot of people. So I have some stats here that I think might be good to share. Um, so first of all, you might have heard this stat, but the stat that half of all marriages end in divorce. Well, that's pretty true. It's also a little more nuanced than that. And it's pretty much only applicable to first marriages. So, like people who get married for the first time, about a little less than half of those will eventually end in divorce at some point. And that rate goes even higher for second and third marriages. I think for second marriages, it's around 60% end in divorce. And then for third marriages, it's like 75%.
Oh, man.
So chances are you're either you yourself or a couple who got married that marriage will end in divorce. Like chances are someone. So it affects a lot of people. How many people? Well, in the U.S., I think lately the rate has been around about 650 to 700,000 or so people a year go through divorce. That number has declined over the past like 20 years or so, but that's mostly because of the fact that marriages have declined over the past 20 years. So it's kind of decreased proportionally with the rate of marriage decreasing in the U.S. So I guess good news that it's decreased, but if you look at it within the rate of divorce to marriage, it really has stayed the same. That half of all marriages end in divorce, and that 60% for second, 75% for third. It's pretty much been the same. So chances are someone who has gone through or is going through a divorce, and so that's why it's important to talk about it. the other reason why it's important to talk about is because, according to many surveys, it's one of the most stressful life events you'll go through. Um, it's basically ranked second behind the death of a close loved one. So that's considered to be kind of like number one stressful life event. Number two is divorce. It's higher than um, things like moving. It's higher than things like starting a new job, or losing your job. It's harder than just a normal breakup. Like whatever stressful life events are out there for people, like this ranks number two. Um, and there's a reason for that. There's a lot of emotional and kind of legal hardship that goes into the process of divorce, and that's why it's so stressful. And so, for all those reasons, I think that's why it's good that we're talking about this today. And I'm hoping that my insights and experience can help at least someone out there get through it a little easier.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much. This was such a strong opening, and I really, really appreciate just everything you've shared, even in these first few minutes of this episode. I think the first thing that stuck out to me was the contrast, right? And I know it was brief, but the contrast between a divorce and a breakup that's not like breaking up of a marriage, and you saying, there's the emotional piece, but then with marriage there's then another layer to it, which is the legal piece, and that's pretty big, to be honest, right? And then the other thing that I think stuck out to me, and that I actually found very interesting, because I would have thought that the stats would have gone in the opposite direction. So you said, for first marriage, it's a 50% divorce rate. For second marriage, it's 60. And then for third, it's 75. And it's increasing. And for some reason in my mind, I was like, well, if, say, someone had a first marriage and then it didn't work out, then maybe when they have a second marriage, there's a higher chance of that working out. So, yeah. So, do you have any just thoughts around that part?
I think it's so interesting, because I'm sitting here today thinking like, well, I've learned my lessons, and the next time I get married, it's gonna be for good. So I feel like I'm a person who, you know, I'm a I got divorced from my first marriage, and my second surely won't end in divorce. I feel very confident about that.
I love that.
I agree with you that I would have thought the same thing, that you kind of learn from your mistake, and this is second time around or third time around, you'll get it right. But the stats kind of move in the opposite direction. Like the rates of divorce go up with each next iteration of marriage, and I think that's because probably a lot of people out there, when they go through one divorce, maybe they're not so scared to go through it again. So that fear of going through it maybe goes away a little bit. So
Mm.
that might make people a little more willing to go through it again. The other reason is that I think people who become accustomed to dealing with divorce, or like relationships not working in general, like maybe this just becomes kind of like their way of life, where like they just kind of associate with people who just not right for them, and get into this pattern essentially of things not working out.
Mm.
I think that can happen a lot. um and I think maybe another reason is that, like, after you get divorced the first time, um like, by the time you are out there dating again, like the pool of people out there who are available goes down. Like, the pool of people was wide open when you were like in your 20s, but then you get divorced and now you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, whatever. Like it just becomes it's less. There's less people out there, and so maybe finding that right person becomes more difficult. Now,
Mm.
you really want to find that person, but it's more difficult, so you end up settling, and that probably isn't a good thing. Probably not a recipe for success. So all that is to say, those are some reasons that I'm, guessing might be reasons why the rates go up as, you get into your second, third marriages. But I agree with you. On the surface, it seems a little contradictory as someone who thinks that, well, I've learned from my mistakes, I learned my lessons, I don't want to go through that again.
Wow. Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts behind that. I think the more I thought about it, too, I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe the stats do go up because maybe that first time that someone gets divorced, there's just a lot of fear, and maybe someone thinks about it for a lot longer than, like, if it's now the second marriage, you're like, you know what, maybe you're less likely to stick around for things that you would have tolerated the first time around, right? So it makes it a bit easier. So I think I was also thinking maybe along the first reason that you gave, but I can also see the other two that you gave. So yeah, very, very interesting things there. Also, what jumped out for me from what you were saying was how, like, divorce was the second biggest life changing event.
Yeah, second most stressful life event that someone goes through. Like, this is just based on like a survey of people. Um,
Hmm.
you know, you find it in many different studies online, but it's typically second on the list of most stressful life events behind death of a close loved one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for saying that. And then I guess also even coupling that with the legal aspect of marriage, I think that's why marriage for a lot of people is such a big deal, right? Because of the fact that, and of course everyone tries to marry right when they get married, right? And you can't see what's going to happen in the future. But I guess even talking about divorce makes you sometimes appreciate more about, I guess, even the thoughts that go into the decision to even get married, just because of the fact that marriage itself is not just a relationship, right? Where you can just walk out and you can break up and there's no legal portion to it. But because this could be, like, the second most stressful thing that could happen to someone's life, then there's a lot more thought to be put into even the decision to marry if that's what someone wants to do. So thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So now, could you maybe share with us what your story looked like?
Yeah, sure. For those who are listening, I'll probably spare you from some of the more personal details here. I'll probably just keep it a little more high level, just kind of protect sensitive details and some confidentiality there. But I definitely can share my story. So basically, I met this person while I was in college. I did not meet them in college. I met them while I was living somewhere else for a summer. Um, and we dated through the rest of our college and even for a little bit after I was done college. um, we got married when I was about a year after I was done school, so when I was 23 years old, back in like 2017. um, so at that point we had been dating for a few years, and we got married with the intention of having our whole life together. It was that was the plan. Um, but some very stressful things happened to us very early on in our marriage, and it caused some ripples and just kind of disruptions in the dynamic of our relationship. And so as time went on, like, we definitely grew more and more apart. Um, it got to a point where we just didn't, have that commitment to each other anymore. And so we identified this, and about 4 years after getting married, so back in like 2021, we mutually decided that we would get separated and go on our separate ways, and get divorced. Um, so then we, went through the process of, we each went our own way in terms of where we're living, you know, and we each, had to get our lawyers, file for the divorce, went through that. And then finally, in about a little less than a year later in 2022, it was, finalized. And so as of a couple of years, about a year and a half ago, I was officially divorced and a single person legally again. And a year and a half out, here I am. I'm, back out there with, living my own life, dating again, and just living the life of a 29 going on 30-year-old.
29 going on 30. I love that. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing that story. I think it's helpful to just kind of hear, you know, how things went, from the start to how things ended eventually. So, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. So now let's talk a little bit more about the experience itself during the process. And, for me, I'm not very familiar with how all these things happen, right? Does it start off as a separation that then becomes a divorce? Or is it one of those like while you're living with someone, you could just decide, okay, like we're getting a divorce. And then when you move away from each other, it's a pretty quick turnaround.
So, the best divorces are ones where the two people are mutually deciding it together, are on the same page about how to, separate things. That is that's how you're gonna have the least amount of headaches and issues, and how it's gonna be the quickest. So, like, and I was fortunate that was my situation where we mutually decided that we wouldn't be together anymore, and so we were able to peacefully, like, ourselves, decide how we were gonna, like, move on, and how we were gonna split things, how we are gonna separate our lives. And that really helped a lot, because even though, I mean, technically you have to, still go through the legal process, you have to, file for the divorce and go through that process. The fact that we were able to, like, figure out a lot of it on our own, definitely helped speed things along, and definitely, made it less costly on us, like, emotionally, financially, um, and overall just a more peaceful ending. Now that's not like how, of course, all divorces go. I mean, our like most divorces do end for reasons such as, like, lack of commitment, or like, you just kind of grew apart, irreconcilable differences, things like that. Like, that's usually cited. That's, like, usually number one reason for divorce. And so if you're in a situation, the more you can mutually decide things, the better. Um, However, I mean, there are a lot of divorces out there that end because of not so peaceful reasons. I mean, there's, things like infidelity, there's things like domestic violence, there's things like, um, like all kinds of hardships that fortunately I did not have to endure. But in those situations, I can imagine it would be a lot more difficult to, mutually decide things together or work together on how to end it. And so in those cases, it's going to be very important to protect yourself, right? Whether that's protecting yourself legally by getting a good lawyer, protecting yourself physically by, like, getting yourself out of that space with that person as quickly as possible, um, protecting yourself socially, like making sure you have family or friends who can support you along the way. Like, if you're in a situation like that where you can't really work together with that person peacefully to end it, it's important that you do what you can to protect yourself.
Mm.
Unfortunately, that will mean that it probably will lengthen the process, and it won't be so clean and easy. But a lot of people are in that situation too. My take on it is, if at all possible, where you can mutually decide things together, it is good to do that, because it will definitely speed up the process and, um, make your life a lot easier.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I really also like how you talked about your experience and how it was mutual, like a mutual decision, and it was a peaceful ending. But then I also really like how you said, not everything ends in that way. for some people, it could get very ugly, and just also depends on the reasons for the divorce and all that kind of stuff. So thanks for painting the picture there. So now can we talk a little bit more about, say, the emotions that you were going through during your experience?
Yeah, sure. I know. I mean, it might not sound like it, because I'm talking about it very, like kind of a neutral tone of voice, but it certainly was the most like stressful thing I ever endured in my life, and was the most. To this day, there's nothing that has like shaped me into who I am more than that experience. So is a very emotional experience, the whole thing.
Mm,
So like I'd say for me, honestly, um, uh, I mean, the hardship emotionally really started like while we were together, married, because the relationship broke down, and like going through the typical stages and feelings of a breakup, like you have like the shock of realizing it's not working anymore. You go through a period of denial, like maybe this isn't actually as bad as it seems, maybe we can work it out. And then you get into feelings of like sadness and anger, and then you get into okay, accepting it, like I recognize that we need to end this. And then you get into that stage of moving on, like all the stages of breakups that we talked about in our first episode together.
hmm.
um you go through all of that with a divorce too, but everything's just on such a more like intense level, because the consequences of the decision are much greater. It's not just emotional anymore. There's like some legal consequences, financial consequences, just life consequences to separating when you're already married. Um, I was fortunate that, like, in our situation, it wasn't too intense. We didn't have kids. We didn't like have any. We didn't own a lot of property together or something like that. It was a pretty like simple from that point of view, but still much more intense than just your average breakup. And so I think that one of the main things I felt during the process was like, just a sense of being overwhelmed with going back and forth in my head on what was the right thing to do. And that going from that stage of like, you know, the denial to the sadness and anger to acceptance, like that took me a lot longer than it would have.
Yeah,
Um,
and before you even continue, something that you mentioned earlier was how you were going through those stages while you were in the relationship, or
yes.
while you were still married. So this was before you, I guess, came to the conclusion that you both were going to end this. So that's very interesting, right? Because I think when I think about breakups, which to your point, a divorce is even another level of a breakup, it's just even higher. But when I think about a breakup, sometimes you do hear of, I guess by the time someone ends the relationship, that person sometimes would have had a longer period of time to think through what's best for them or to grieve the relationship prior to actually saying that it's over, right? And then you have another person who might be like, oh, I actually didn't see this coming. And then their process of the stages of going through the breakup would start after. So I think that was very, very interesting to me that in your story, it's kind of like you went through this before actually coming to the divorce decision.
Yes. And I'd say really like both of us went through this like evolution of, realizing we should end this and accepting that like while we were still together. And I
Okay.
think that's what allowed us to, you know, come to this mutual decision and, move forward and it in a very peaceful way where we were like working together.
You both got to that acceptance stage And that's actually what allowed you to continue peacefully. Because if you both hadn't gotten to acceptance, then this could have ended in a different way. Did I get that correctly?
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Like, I mean, sometimes you see on shows or online or whatever, like like the whole adage, like, "Oh, you've been served, bitch," like
Oh my gosh,
like
Colin!
I
I've
would.
never heard you use the B word. I am gone.
Hey, these sensitive topics require some new vocabulary.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that came out of nowhere. That was good. Yeah.
Yeah, so like that's certainly another approach you could take to this, where like you can just keep these thoughts to yourself, and then just one day hit the person with a wham. Here's the divorce papers. Um, that I honestly, I mean, I don't recommend that approach, because if you put the other person in a state where they are like totally shocked and like ambushed or didn't see it coming, then it's not going to be a very peaceful, a separation. And I feel like that's not really in your best interest or theirs, to go through it like that. I think the more peaceful you can make it, the better. Um, it's better for you emotionally. It's better for how the process will go legally. It's also just better kind of morals and ethics, I feel like. But that being said, not all situations are the same. There are some situations where maybe you've tried bringing it up with the other person and it just they're not listening or something. So you kind of do just have to be the one to just end it abruptly. But I really recommend against that if possible.
Okay. Did you guys try counseling?
No, we didn't. We I think we had a pretty good dynamic where our communication was good between each other. We definitely considered it, but I think we kind of both came to the same conclusion, and so we decided not to do that. But I definitely think it's a good idea. I think there's certainly a lot of relationships or marriages out there that would benefit from doing some counseling before just going through, you know, something like a divorce, because there might be some reconcilable differences or things about a relationship that can be fixed. So I definitely recommend that, for those who are considering it. um, but in our situation, just we I think we both decided it wasn't really, uh, like, we both weren't interested, so we didn't do that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you for sharing. I think, yeah, that's you brought up some key things here where you're like, okay, for you guys, the communication was good. So there was communication happening there. So for you, you didn't feel like counseling was the direction you'd want to take it. But, to your point, for some other people, maybe counseling could help. It could help to have a third party who could help you see if the differences are reconcilable. But of course, it would just vary from relationship to relationship or marriage to marriage. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I kind of just want to wrap up one thought I had on the prior question,
Sure.
which was the kind of the emotions going through the process. So I described a little bit the emotions of, like, while I was in the marriage and thinking about getting divorced. But like once we were going through the divorce itself, I would describe the experience of that to be a pretty big mix of emotions. I think one of the main things I felt was, sadness, like, and loneliness, like, going back to a life where I'm not with that person anymore. Like, that certainly was a pretty, overwhelming feeling. Um, but I also had a very overwhelming feeling of like relief and positivity, because I was like, I'm going to get my life back. I'm going to, um, kind of refind myself. I'm gonna, do the things I've been wanting to do, and I'm gonna, find happiness again. So I'd say relief was also a very big thing that I felt. Um, and then as time went on, like as as I healed through that, certainly I could feel myself like getting better, and being able to carry on with my life again. Um, and so as time went on, I feel like I really, healed back to to my whole self. Um, and so just finish the other question. I just felt like it's good to mention, like, during the process of divorce itself, definitely a big mix of emotions go on. And for me, I think the biggest ones were a combination of sadness, but also, um, really big sense of relief.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for walking us through the emotions, leading up to the divorce and then the emotions after the divorce. Because I think one of the questions that I was actually going to ask was, if the feeling on the other side, if there was a little bit of regret, but, from what you're saying, it wasn't regret, it was actually relief. There was, of course, the sadness and loneliness where, you were used to living and doing life with someone and that person wasn't there anymore. But I also love how you also ended this all with, but at the end of it all, there was light at the end of the tunnel, and you did feel like positivity and also just the healing that then came after that. So that's amazing. Thanks for sharing.
Of course.
So, having gone through all that, there are some lessons that you learned from your experience, and then also based on your experience, I'm sure there's some advice that you could share with folks who are listening. So, any thoughts around that?
Yes, I'd say that's really is the most important part of this whole experience is the lessons that I've learned from it, and definitely would like to share some of those because I hope it might help somebody out there. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned is, what like the seriousness of what marriage is. Like, marriage is, yes, a kind of the ultimate, um, you know, like, goal in a relationship typically. It's based on love, um, mostly. But I would say that marriage is what I learned is, like, marriage is not just about love. I'd say it's also a little bit of a, um, there's a bit of of an economic or, like, legal, part of it that I think it's very important to think about. It's not just about, like, do you love this person? I feel like it's also about, do you trust this person to, like, build and live a life with them? And so that's a big lesson I learned is it's not just like, oh, I have these strong feelings for this person, and I still get googly eye when I look at him, or I still get breath taken away when I look at her. Like, it's not just about those feelings. It's also about, like, you and this person, you work well together and you trust each other that you can go through life together and you'll be a team. I think that is one of the biggest lessons I learned, and to be serious about who that person is when you decide to marry them.
Wow. And do you think that while you're dating someone, actually, you'd be able to pick up that part of like, can I build my life with them? Or do you think as you're married to someone, that's when you'll start to see more of who the person is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little of both. Um, Unfortunately, there are some things you just won't know until you get married. You won't really know what it's like until you do it. So, unfortunately, you have to take a little bit of a leap of faith on some things. But I do think there are certain things you can learn before you do get married to kind of get a sense of that. Um, One, I think, the more time you've spent with that person, the better. Um, like, having dated, for, a substantial amount of time, like maybe, several years, and you've gone through, many different, life events together already. You've been through the ups and the downs and the in betweens. You've been in, like, many different situations together. You've been through, stressful situations in each other's lives together. You've been through happy situations. I think the more time that you've spent with each other, dealing with like a variety of situations, and you come out the other side of those each time feeling, like your relationship is even stronger than it was before. I think those are good signs that your relationship has that second component I've been talking about, where you can build a life together.
Mm.
I would say another good one is like, this may not work for everybody depending on, your religious beliefs, but I believe that, having some time living together helps. Um, because when you get married, you are going to live with that person. I think if it's possible to have some time to live with that person before you get married, I think that is a great test, because you'll get to feel a little bit what that's like. And anyone could put on their best version of themselves, like when they can go home behind closed doors and just get themselves ready, and they'll show you the best version of themselves when they see you out on the date or out in public. But when you live with someone, you see them at their most raw moments, and I firmly believe that if you can accept people even in those moments, then that's a good sign that you're good for each other. So, in my opinion, yes, there are some things you can do even when you're dating to get a sense of that second component of, can I build a life with this person? Like, are we going to work together? It's not. There are things you can do to make sure it's more than just love.
I love that. I love what you said, because I think we talk a lot about love. Heck, this podcast is called Unpacking Love. But I think for you to like say, for something like marriage, it's beyond I love this person. There's so much more to it, because I guess at the end of the day, coming back to what you said about your story, the goal when you guys got married was to do life together, like to spend, it didn't work out that way, but you wanted to spend the rest of your lives together. And so I can see what you're saying and how that makes sense, that if you want to be with someone for the rest of your life, then you want to be able to answer the question of, can I actually see myself building with this person? I guess logically, without even talking about what love is.
Yeah, so that's one lesson. I think another lesson I learned is, um, be really honest with yourself when you're dating about what you want in another person, or what you want in your relationship, or what you want in your partner. Be really honest with yourself about what you're looking for. Um, you may say to yourself, oh, I can deal with this, or I can deal with that, but be very honest about it, because those deal breakers for you, or those red flags for you, um, they won't just magically go away. They will eventually present themselves later on in more serious situations, and you will regret having not listened to yourself earlier. So I think that's my second lesson, is when you're dating, know what know what you're looking for and what your deal breakers are, and be really honest about um pursuing that when you're dating. um and I think it's totally okay, um to say no to a person, like, hey, I'm sorry, you're just not right for me, you're not what I'm looking for, or some things about us that are just not going to work. It's okay to do that, because you need to make sure that your happiness comes first, and that your relationship will be one that works. So be very honest about yourself with yourself about what you want and what you don't want.
Oh, that was deep. I mean, we talk a lot about red flags and deal breakers. I think what hit home about what you said was the fact that you said those things won't magically disappear, right? Because I feel like what happens sometimes with dating is prior to meeting someone, you can have a list of things that you're looking for. But then you meet someone and, the vibes are right. The chemistry is just chemistrying. And you're like, you know what? For this person, I'm okay with going without like number one, the number one thing on my list, right? But then to your point, if that thing was important, so it was a deal breaker, or if you always had a list of red flags and this person is well, they are exhibiting signs of, having those red flags, you saying for this person, I'll make an exception could be to your detriment because to your point those things are actually not going to disappear magically, quoting what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And like this probably is a list of things for yourself that like, maybe aren't ideal, but you could, tolerate or you could live with. But you should be really honest about yourself with yourself about like what's actually on that list and not something that's truly a red flag or deal breaker, something you truly are looking for. Um, I mean, no two people are perfect. I've yet to meet a couple who's like perfectly um, uh, like in sync. Like every couple has like some things about them that are different. I think the question is like, are those things you're willing to deal with it? You're willing to live with it. You're willing to tolerate it. And so I think be really honest with yourself about your list of things you want, things you don't want, and things you are actually willing to tolerate or deal with.
I love that. I love that.
Another lesson I learned is don't forget the value of the other loved ones in your life, even when you get married. Um, you have your family or your friends or other loved ones in your social network. Like those relationships in your life are important and you should maintain those. Um, because when I, before, during, after, you know, the divorce, like those relationships, that network I had in my life it was my life savior. I mean, those people really helped me to get through my experience and helped me feel like I wasn't alone, feel like I didn't have to deal with it, you know, alone. And, they really helped me get through my experience. Those close loved ones in my life really helped me. And so I think a big lesson I learned is, um, also like prioritize like maintaining your family and friendships in your life because you never know like when you're really going to need them to help you. um and there's other like loved ones in your circle who deserve to get your time and attention because they may need you, you may need them, you never know. But those
Mm.
relationships you have in your life are also important.
Wow. Yeah, thanks. And I know we're talking about, this episode is about divorce, and your answer was also kind of from that angle of divorce. But even talking about people who do get married and stay married, something that I've just heard from, friends or reels on Instagram is how it's so important to still maintain those friendships because your spouse is also not going to be everything for you. So I really like what you said that, at the end of the day, through the life stages, just not neglecting your friends and your family and the importance of those relationships. As you said, for you, they were your savior after everything, went down, right? But yeah, I guess even through whatever processes and through just life happenings, it's just good to still have community.
Yes, that's a great insight. Yes, like even if your marriage is going successfully, it's even in that situation, it is still important to maintain these other relationships in your life. It is a little like naive to expect that like that one partner in your life will be everything, will provide like that one person in your life can't be everything for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you really shouldn't, isolate yourselves like that, or you shouldn't also set yourselves up for, all that like pressure like that. I mean, there are certain things that, maybe you just can't find in your relationship with your partner that you're going to find better with your parents or your siblings or your friends or, even coworkers. Maybe just you have mentors in your life.
Right, right.
Right. Like these people in your life offer things that, maybe your partner cannot. And so it's like, it is important, absolutely, to prioritize maintaining those relationships, even if your marriage or relationship is going successfully.
Hmm.
So another lesson for you. Um, I have learned the hard way that people do kind of evolve as they get older. Um, so I think at my purest self, like I am, the same soul that I was back in my teens and early 20s. But like my experiences that I go through in life um, have, shaped me and evolved me into kind of a new version of myself today. Where like I don't, I'm not sure if I would make some of the same decisions I would make when I was in my early 20s. Um, and I think that's important to know for those out there that you may think that when like you're of a early age, like you know exactly what you want for the rest of your life, but you should be a little cautious and recognize like you also may not know. And this doesn't just apply to marriage. This applies to anything. Like you may think, oh, I have a career picked out. Like I want to be an accountant or I want to be an engineer, and then you go actually do it and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't like this, I need to make a change. um Maybe you have certain like friend groups you were in that you thought, oh, these are my friends for life, and as you get older people change a little bit and you're like, oh, you know what, these are not my friends, I need to find new ones. So like it's not just with love or relationships, it's kind of applies to anything. But um, I think the lesson I'm trying to get across here is be mindful of the fact that as you get older, you will evolve into kind of a newer version of yourself. And so I think that's a good reason to, um, like spend more time with people and make sure that they are the right person for you. Like make sure the relationship goes on for a couple more years, and like as you evolve, it still feels right. It still feels like it's what you want to do with your life. It's who you want to spend your life with. Basically the lesson is we go through evolutions in our and who we are as people and our personalities. Make sure you are cognizant of that when you're deciding who you're with, because you want to make sure that as you evolve they're still the right person for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it also just has so much depth. Or what adds depth to what you've said is how, you did mention you got married when you were young, right? And then to say, and I know what you said was not just specific to marriage, but to say, as you get older, some of the decisions that you would have made at 24 might not be the exact same decisions you would make at 30, right? So as you get older, just your thoughts on things could change as well. So it's important to just be aware of those things as you make certain decisions in your life, in whatever aspect of your life you're looking at.
Absolutely. Another lesson I'd like to share, and this might be helpful for people who are considering getting divorced or maybe going through it themselves. um, Divorce doesn't have to be that scary. That's another lesson I learned. um, I was certainly terrified of it, and it was the reason why like maybe I didn't go through with it earlier. But I personally was terrified. But I've learned, through experience that it actually isn't so scary if you do it right. If you get a good, lawyer, the lawyer will, help you understand everything along the way, to make you feel like, confident in what the process is like, and like what the results will be for you. If you are peaceful with your partner, that'll help as well. If you have, loved ones you can lean on and talk to, if you need to, like get a therapist while you're going through the process, that helps. Like, it doesn't have to be so scary. There's a purpose to the whole process, which is to get you back to your whole self again, so you can kind of start over. Um, and that really should be a positive thing if you think about it. You're ending something that wasn't good, and so you can kind of like restart your your life again. And so it doesn't have to be a scary thing. It's better to end a bad relationship and start your new one than it is to endure something bad and continue being, unhappy, or continue being sad. It's so, like, my lesson is, it is better to make sure you end a bad relationship rather than endure something bad. And the divorce process doesn't have to be so scary. Obviously, it's not ideal. It's not what you planned for. It's not what either of you planned for. But if, when you get to that point, it's best that you recognize that it's what's best for both of you. And if you both have that mindset, it really won't be that scary. The one maybe last piece of insight I'd give is, maybe not so much a lesson, but something, I definitely have experienced. I feel like there's a bit of a stigma around, divorce, right? Like, it's one of those things that, people don't really want to talk about. It's a little bit of a taboo topic. If you hear someone say they're divorced, it's like, oh, like, you know what, just like maybe some stigma or judgment around them. And I gotta say, to an extent, that is true. There is like some stigma out there for like people who are divorced. Like, I've certainly experienced it myself. Like, when I tell people I'm divorced, sometimes it changes like how they like interact with me. But I'd say it has mostly been a lot better than I expected it to be. Like, I expected, like, people would treat me different at work, people would treat me different in my friendships. I thought, like, I would never be able to date again because people wouldn't want to, date someone who was divorced. Like, I had all these like fears in my head because of the stigma around it. But I realized a lot of it was just kind of in my own head. Like, a lot of it was like self-inflicted stigma, so to speak. As I've gone on in my life post divorce, I've realized it's been a lot better than I expected. People are actually a lot more understanding and accepting of it than I thought. And I've been able to go on with my life, and it's truly been something in my past. And I can carry on with my life without that stigma like I thought I would be having.
Ooh, which brings me to my next question. So, are you dating?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, 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 honey. I love it. Spill the tea. Spill the tea.
Well, you know me, Michelle. I'm a sucker for love. So of course I was gonna get myself back out there eventually.
Come on, Colin said I'm on the market, y'all. He's back. He's back. And like you said, right, he was younger back then. Now he's like, a little bit more mature, 29 going on 30. So, how has your experience shaped how you approach dating now? Do you think it has, you know, changed anything?
That's such a good question because I'm living through it right now. So you're right. I am dating. I put myself back out there. I was in a relationship after a divorce that also ended. So I've you know had a relationship even after my divorce come and go. So now I'm on pursuing that next relationship right now. I'm on the apps, like everyone else is nowadays. It's put myself out there, just kind of starting over. But yeah, definitely it has changed my approach to dating a little bit. Um, just going back to some of my like lessons I learned, I'm definitely a lot more careful about who I'm looking for and what I'm looking for, because I know what the consequences are if you don't find exactly what you're looking for. So I'm a lot more careful about that now. Something else I've also it's also changed my approach to dating is like how I approach like the tougher kinds of conversations. Like I think it's really important in dating to, make sure you're having fun with it. You don't want to like be getting into heavy topics right from the start. That's just not how connections form. But it is important that from time to time you prioritize, like, okay, we need to work in some more important topics or conversations, and make sure we're hashing certain things out, because you don't want to let those important things get brushed under the rug or forgotten about. Like I've learned how to work in those important conversations into my um into my dating, basically.
Hmm.
And then another thing I think that's changed in my approach to dating is I've learned to really appreciate the apps. Because the apps, I mean, I don't know, I guess I'm still young, so I'm 29 years old, but I feel like meeting people is a lot different now when you're at 29, because it's not so easy to just like meet people like it was back in college or when you're first starting out. Like, you know, I feel like nowadays it's a little harder to just like meet people randomly,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this world like post COVID. Um, so I've learned to really appreciate the apps because it's allowed me to meet people who I would otherwise would not have met. The other reason I've learned to appreciate it is because, a lot of those like important details, those deal breakers, those red flags, like you can iron those out right away before you even start talking to a person. Things like kids, or how you feel about, drinking, how you feel about, like where you live, like all those kinds of like details. Like if those kinds of things are important to you, you can iron those out right away before you even start talking. So those are just a few things that have changed in my approach.
Okay. I absolutely love that. What is an example of having a tough conversation like in dating someone? And I'm guessing this is before, did you mean like before you get into a relationship, or did you mean in a relationship?
I mean, kind of both, to be honest. Some examples of like tougher conversations are things like kids, things like how you would handle um, certain situations with like family. Maybe um, talking about like what's your vision for your future, what do you want your life to look like. um Things like, what would you do if you were in this situation or that situation. Like those are the kind of tougher conversations I'm talking about. Things where like you
Mm,
really learn about, like, are they good for you, you know like kind of on paper, so to speak. And then even when you're in a relationship, yes, like it absolutely holds true even then. Like it's important to learn how to have those, tougher conversations and how to work issues out together. I think that's like one of the most critical parts of any relationship is like how you navigate conflict together. Like I think that's probably one of the most important, or one of the most like telltale signs of like if a relationship is working is like, do you get through conflicts well together? And I think how you communicate through those, like learning how to talk through those effectively, such an important part of relationship being successful, in my opinion. So I think, in some cases, sometimes I wonder, like, if it's better in relationships just like cut right to the chase and just like find something to fight over like right away. It's like, oh, like if you're at a bar together, maybe just like purposely just like, drop their glass on the floor and see how they react. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if that's better, because then you can get right to the like how you navigate conflict together, and that's such an important thing. But I obviously do not advocate for like starting conflicts unnecessarily. That's a joke.
That was
Um,
good though. That was funny.
but I do think that those are the moments where you really learn. Do you really work well together? And so I think it's important to be able to know how to have those tough conversations or deal with those tough situations together.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I absolutely love that. And I actually really love that this was kind of the point where we'll end the episode, because these are all things that you need to, think about as you go into relationships, right? And especially if you're going to consider marriage, kind of thinking about the future. And to your point, some of those things will come out while you're dating someone, but some of those things also need to come through the form of tough conversations. And so this was really, really good, Colin. Thank you so, so much for coming to share your experience with us. And then for also sharing some of the lessons that you've learned, and also sharing like advice with people who are listening, right, about some of these things. So thank you so, so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me on your show again. And I hope everyone who's listening enjoyed hearing some of my experience and insights. I hope whoever's out there, if you're going through divorce yourself or know someone who is, I hope what I said helps you or helps them. And to that end, if you do know someone who's going through it, or if you're going through it yourself, don't be afraid to reach out to that person or reach out to someone for help. You never know, like, the support you have from friends and loved ones will really help them. So I hope for those out there listening, I hope you found this conversation I had with Michelle helpful.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you so much, Colin. And if anyone has a question for Colin on anything that he said, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram and I can pass your questions over to him. You can reach me at Unpacking Love on Instagram. Always happy to hear from all of you. Thank you so, so much to everyone who has listened to the episode. I really, really appreciate the support. Make sure that you leave stars on the podcast, guys. Leave ratings, okay? Thank you so much for listening. I will catch you in the next episode. Peace. Ndiwe wandiro ya moyo wangu, ndiwe wandikanganiza fungo zangu.